Here we go. Okay, lovely. So we are good to go. Welcome everybody to a fantastic evening that we have planned here at Coding Black Females. Today we're going to be hearing from some of our experts on AI and machine learning. And I'm particularly excited to learn a whole heap of new information. My background is software engineering, and I know basically nothing about AI and machine learning, although I hear everybody talk about it all the time. So very excited to have with us some fantastic people to learn a bit more. What I will start by doing is giving you all an introduction to Coding Black Females and the work that we do, in case you've not come across us before, although you're all here right now, so I imagine you have come across us in the past. But I will get started in telling you a bit about what we do at Coding Black Females. So we have been around since 2017, and we've got a really key focus on trying to increase representation of Black women in tech. We do that with a range of activities and looking at a range of levels. And we have a 20,000 strong global community now, and it continues to grow. So through our events, job board that we have available, mentor programs and training, there's something for everybody within the community. Just wanted to give you a quick update on things that are currently open here at Coding Black Females. So we do have a job board, and there are quite a few roles on there at the moment for anybody who's looking for positions. We have roles spanning from entry level right through to experienced, and a range of companies as well with some of those roles available. We also have quite a lot of events coming up at the moment too. So we kind of have events every single week here at Coding Black Females. It doesn't really stop, but we're really keen to make sure that people can learn a range of knowledge. So we have some in-person events. We also have some online events where our in-person events will be in London and in Bristol, alongside with some online events. And as I said, this is a great way to get involved no matter what level you are in tech. So whether you're looking at starting out, we've got some great opportunities for you there. But then also for people who are more experienced and you maybe want to look at open source, or how you can be part of an open source community, we have events with people like GitLab as well towards the end of next month. We do have mentorship programs that we run here at Coding Black Females, and we have one open at the moment, which is our Discovering Excellence Youth Mentor Program. So if you'd like to be a mentor or a mentee, that's something that you could be signing up to. And alongside that, we run a range of boot camps, and the boot camps that we have open currently are our AWS Restart, Entry to Tech, and Return to Tech. And the dates that you can see there in brackets are the upcoming start dates. But that was a very, very quick, high level. These are things that are coming up at Coding Black Females. It's not about this today. It is about the fantastic talk and panel discussion that we're going to be having from the people that we have with us today. So what I'm going to ask from all of you, first of all, is if you can give a quick introduction to yourself for everybody who is with us today. I will start with Joyanne.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joyanne Boyce. I'm the founder of a AI startup called Include AI. We're building a platform to detect bias in written language. My background is marketing, but I had this idea for a startup, and then I decided to do a data science master's. So I'm a hybrid of marketing and data science, and they tend to battle in my brain. But I'm excited to talk to everyone and explore AI and machine learning.
Thank you. Over to you, Emeka.
Me?
Oh,
Oh,
yes, Amaka,
Emeka.
sorry.
Sorry,
Emeka,
that's
very
okay.
Yeah,
good.
That's okay.
yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Wama Kaidiwe. I'm a control and data scientist at Microsystems. Just like Joanne, I'm a hybrid. So I come from a finance and business background into data. Um, so I predominantly work with dashboards and building predictive modeling using machine learning. On the side, I also contribute at Unify AI to help build up Project Ivy. Uh, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. And Wasila?
Hi everyone, I'm Wasilat Olatinwo. I have a background in mathematics where I kind of learned about data analysis, data science, and I decided to do my master's in data science. I currently work as a finance systems data analyst, which is basically a data analyst for from working with data gotten from systems that organizations use.
Thank you. And Yudia?
Hi, I'm Yudia. I'm an analyst in the applied artificial intelligence team at Goldman Sachs. I started as a software engineering background, did a computer science undergrad, and then decided to study more on the data science and machine learning side of things. So I've been doing that for a few years now.
Thank you. And then Emeka as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'll say I've basically been doing machine learning for the past 4 years and currently work at Zep AI where we basically build auxiliary component mostly for LLM applications. So I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you. Awesome. So great to have all of you with us this evening. And I know that everyone's very excited to learn and take as much from you, from all of your knowledge as well. First of all, it'd be great to get an overview as to what all of you do on a day-to-day. You all work in slightly different positions, so it'd be great to get that insight, especially for people who may be already working in other areas of tech or who may be looking at what it would mean if they were to start a career in that area as well. So yeah, it'd be great to get that insight. Yudia, would you be able to go first?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, as I mentioned, I work in the applied AI team based here in London. I work at an investment bank, so naturally, kind of the problems that we work on are more in the quantitative finance space. So this is kind of broad, but in terms of quantitative finance, there are a bunch of different problems solved by AI, like time series forecasting, pricing, content recommendation, portfolio rebalancing. So kind of those are kind of the types of problems that you might encounter, and this spans the whole breadth of the problem, essentially, from like program management or product management, all the way to research, kind of reading papers, adapting those papers, to the kind of infrastructure and the deployment of whatever it is that you create as well. So it's a mixed bag of like research, software engineering, product, all mixed in.
Thank you. And Wamaka?
Great. So as a data scientist that specializes in dashboards and predictive modeling, the bulk of what I do is just leveraging tech to derive insights from data and then presenting these dashboards just to see trends, just to see what's going on there. So I work in Microsystems as a business consultant, CFRAM. So we get to work with an array of clients from different industries, different backgrounds. So it's something new every day, every time. It could be sales, it could be marketing, it could be finance services. So, just deriving insights for the clients based on the data. On the side, I also viewed models, predictive models, with machine learning, of course. And so there's that as well. So I would say on the less techie side, what I do is I'm constantly collaborating with teams, cross-functional teams, just trying to understand business requirements, understand what it is I need to do, and see how we can integrate these models into the current business.
Thank you. I'm already learning a lot. Sorry, I'm taking it all in. I'm gonna hand over to Emeka as well.
Yeah, so I think for me, my role is more or less like a more diverse role, I'll say, because today I can be reading research paper, tomorrow I'm writing code, next tomorrow I'm doing some AWS stuff. But majority of my responsibility at Zep is around basically evaluating most of the machine learning that we use for our internal applications. So we have Zep Cloud and we also have Zep Open Source Library. So most of the models that we use for section extractor, summarization, and other component of functionalities. So I basically evaluate these models to make sure that they meet a certain standard and we're able to deliver the kind of threshold or the standard that we actually, or our partner, anticipate.
I had a slight follow-on question to that. So you mentioned that you read a lot of research papers, that sort of thing. Is that because it's a relatively I feel like it's not that new an area, if you know me, but is it because there's a lot of new things coming out in the area, or is it because you're
Yes.
the type of role being more senior?
So I think it's because of the new kind of research and strategies that are coming out every day. I mean, today you wake up, we have Llama 3, next tomorrow, So most importantly, right, you were able to see what you want to work on, you're able to see research on that particular area, and you're able to also deep dive into the research paper to understand what kind of architecture, what strategy are they using, their empirical study to understand how they basically able to do this research and what the output of the research is. And most importantly, you want to see the impact of this research on your project. Does it have a positive or negative impact? Something like that. So for instance, we actually have a summarization pipeline, and we want to be able to, we use Mistral AI for the summarization, and we want to be able to evaluate if the prompt that we're using basically fit into or extracting key points from the summaries or the entire passage of the document. So we want to evaluate this summarization pipeline. So first thing we want to do is we want to look into taking a look at research papers to see what is the level at which we are in terms of architecture and strategy for summarization evaluation, right? So you want to do some of these things and not just like pick any kind of random libraries or to like that to like do evaluation. You want to know, okay, what is the recent research on this particular kind of like application? Yeah.
Hey, thank you. That makes sense. Wasila, over to you.
Like I mentioned earlier, I work as a finance systems data analyst at Rotalk, which is a manufacturing company. But day to day, I work mostly with the finance team to kind of understand the reporting needs that they have and build reports for them. Could be high-level reports or the operational reports that they use day to day.
Thank you. Joyanne, I'm going to hand over to you. I know your role might be a bit different because you're a founder alongside, having a background in data as well. So it'd be great to get your insights into what you do day to day, looking at things from a slightly different perspective.
So it's a wide variety. I relate to a lot of what's been said in terms of the research paper. There's so much coming out so quickly with AI. So my role varies. There's the obvious founder stuff, finance, all of that. But in terms of the AI bit, a lot of what I say is like I'm a theoretical data scientist. So I spend a lot of time interacting with public AI models, trying to make them bias and trying to get them to produce things that they shouldn't. So trying to really test the boundaries of what people have publicly. And on top of that, also a lot of my work involves talking to people around, do they understand the bias that AI holds? So I speak a lot to marketeers and recruiters around how they use it, how they interact with it. And then we try and build something that's friendly. But in terms of like the data science element, it's either building out a database of really bad bias words and phrases, and theoretically planning a lot of how our AI models are going to test and work around that. And then I hand that over to our tech lead to kind of build that out. The closest I got to code, so I can code slightly, Charlene, do not laugh. I know enough Python to be dangerous. I tend to call Charlene and complain, and she's like, she doesn't do Python, and then we have a whole discussion about it. But during my master's, I built a application that can determine how gendered text was. So if anyone's seen the gender decoder, the application I built for my dissertation was using Python to kind of say, okay, this is slightly feminine or slightly masculine rather than trying to rule it out altogether. So a little bit of code, but mostly theoretical data science.
Okay, so you're kind of coming up with the ideas of things that could be a bit broken and then trying to figure out what the solution could be to fix it.
Yes, I have a lot of headaches, a lot.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Thank you. And I know that, and this question is something that I'm really interested in personally. It's something that I actually asked Joyanne about quite a lot. It's really, how data, machine learning, and AI all work together, and looking at, most of your backgrounds, noticing the fact that you used to work in data and now you might work in machine learning, or you maybe were doing machine learning, but you've also mentioned AI, that sort of thing. So it'd be great to know what the actual relationship is between the three topics. One of the reasons that I want to know is also because we have a lot of people that come to us who are looking at, being in different roles within tech. So they're like, hey, I want to learn machine learning. Do I need to know data? Do I need to know this? That sort of thing. But then also for those people that are more experienced, if people have been doing data for the last data science something for the last like 20 years, does that mean that they can then lend themselves to being quite beneficial within the AI space now, that sort of thing? So it'd be great to know how all of that relates together. I'm actually going to ask Yudia to go first, if that's okay, because I know that you've got a bit of a background that spans all of the areas.
Yes, sure. So essentially, AI is more of like the umbrella, if you will, of like technologies that are designed to help computers mimic human behavior or mimic human intelligence. And then within that, you have this subset of machine learning, which is you can think of like a technique of implementing this framework of AI. So machine learning is more on like the statistical method, the numerical methods for how to teach machines to mimic human behavior. Sorry, the light in this room is just turned off. But then data kind of underpins what it is, what machine learning is. Like essentially, you're using past experiences to inform future decisions, and data is kind of like the lifeblood of how all of that works.
Thank you. One thing that I wanted to know, if you could delve into a bit more, was the fact that you mentioned that machine learning was like a subset of AI. What would another subset of AI be? I don't know if that's a really broad question, but what would another subset be of that?
Oh, now you're challenging me. Now, like, I'm racking my brains. Maybe someone else can
Yeah, feel
chime
free to
in,
put the
but
answer.
yeah,
I would
now
say
you're
it's a
challenging.
harder one as well because even AI being a subset of machine learning is debated within the community because I subscribe to the opposite, which is that you can't have AI without machine learning. So
Yeah.
AI, so
So
it goes
machine
back and
learning is a
forth.
subset. Yeah.
Right.
So it's hard to
But
really separate the two and really like pin it down.
yeah, I was just thinking, it just came to me like another example of like what would come under AI is like symbolic reasoning, which came about before machine learning. So almost like expert-based, rule-based systems where you as an expert will define the rules for how a system should behave and operate. And then it's able to almost follow this set of instructions to behave in a particular way. But that's very different to machine learning.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm sorry. My mouth's like, wow. Okay, that sounds really interesting. So basically, people can they can work in AI, I guess, without doing anything machine learning based at all, because there are other areas within it as well.
Yeah, there are. I would say right now machine learning is like the dominant one, very much the prominent one, and has been for a long time, but there are definitely other areas there.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any insights into any other areas of distinction between data machine learning and AI? I don't know if anybody else has anything they'd like to add to that.
I can go. Okay,
Absolutely.
great. I think I would say that I think data is more like at the core of the three. So obviously, data being, we have the data, and then we have the data in terms of the profession. So data analytics, data science. I would say, to answer your question, saying if I've had 20 years of experience in data analysis, for example, can I then do machine learning? I would say yes. You can obviously you would need to do some work to learn, but you can, because data is at the core. So you having that understanding of data, you know what the data is about, what you can achieve with the data, you can go for it. To answer AI and machine learning being subset or together in the same category, I would say something like ChatGPT, for example, it is AI, but to explain it, so it's like to differentiate, most AI models or technologies would require some form of machine learning, in my opinion, because they're trying to do things standalone. And the point of machine learning is to help these models make decisions, sometimes on their own, sometimes be supervised, but like just to predict, make decisions. So I would say a good number of, obviously there are different like aspects of AI, but I would say a good number of models will use machine learning because then they need to learn, they need to understand the data, which again is at the core, to be able to do what it is that they need to do. So for ChatGPT, for example, would have had data being fed into it, trained over time, tested to then give the right answers, make to be able to answer questions essentially for whatever it is that the user is using it for. So it is an AI model, but it is, I hope that makes sense. Just simplify it a bit.
So tell me if I've just completely made something up, but from what you've said, you have a huge amount of data, right? And then you'll train a model or a system for a period of time using machine learning, which then gives us something like ChatGPT, as you mentioned, which is the artificial intelligence that uses all of that data that has been trained.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's essentially ChatGPT is a large language model. I would say it's more of an AI model than machine learning, but it is machine learning based, I would say, because then it's had to like be trained, tested out.
Okay, thank you. Well, hopefully it's cleared it up for me. I'm hoping it's cleared it up for everybody as well. But that was really, really insightful to get that sort of view. So you've mentioned, obviously, we've spoken a lot about data machine learning, and Joyanne, you were mentioning Python and some of the other roles people may have had, earlier on. But what skills and typical areas of knowledge do people need to have to actually develop in this particular area and actually use machine learning or AI within their work? Wassalat, would you be able to start with that?
Okay. Just like what every other person has said, data is kind of like the basis of this whole data profession, and it's good for you to understand like the basic skills like data cleaning and even understanding how you don't necessarily need to know how to code, but just understanding how it works is also very important. And something that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about is also domain knowledge, which is basically like understanding whatever industry you're working in, whatever organization you're working in, understanding what they do and what kind of data they generate will also help you progress and like just solve problems faster.
That's really interesting actually. So you feel as though, or from what you've said, it's actually quite beneficial to the domain knowledge could actually be really useful, I guess, for understanding what the data is you're even looking at, right? And
yeah, and also interpret like whatever problem they want. For example, like if you want to build, in my case, building reports, it's kind of good to understand what kind of financial data they need, what kind of financial data they have rather, to help make decisions like, oh, okay, this data will be the best to be able to solve or answer this problem that you have.
That makes sense. And I guess if you're not already working with that particular data in your business that you are working in, at least understanding what other data could be out there would be really valuable as well. Joyanne, would you be able to give some additional insight? So what sort of skills and knowledge could be useful for this?
I just wanted to double down as well on that domain knowledge element. I think when approaching AI and data science in general, you can come from it from two aspects: the pure data, learning code, learning Python, learning R or SQL. And if you've had experience in any of those languages in another thing, you can easily convert that. Or you can come from it from the domain knowledge aspect, where you know enough about the domain and you're approaching that problem solving skill to pre-built AI tools out there and you're advancing them, or you're trying to provide the expertise to make them useful to a particular sector. And that's how I got into data science essentially through the marketing. There's a lot of data analysis in marketing. There's a lot of like, in terms of Google Analytics and all of that. So that knowledge I was able to convert when I went into the role. So I think if you don't think you have any direct skills, look at the domain expertise you have and see what problems are in your industry and then work that way from it.
Would that then, if you're looking at those problems that you may already have, would you say then what would you then go on to learn, I suppose? So you're like, okay, I can see these issues in the same way that you've seen issues, within marketing and you're solving them. How did you then know this is what I should go and pick up on and learn, and that this is the data sets that I need to use? How did you even know where to start?
So the answer I would give when I started to answer now is very different. So the answer when I started was, I was like, this problem seems really simple. It's the analogy I use is like AI is like a puppy. You can train it to do many things. Different puppies come in different forms. They also have previous trainers. So I thought, okay, this is a problem I feel I can train a machine to do. So I started to try and do that and stumbled into the code. The answer I'd give now is have a conversation with ChatGPT about the problem, see how bad the answers are because you have the domain experience, and then start working it that way. I think that is an easier approach. I'm not sure how everyone feels about the ChatGPT element, but a lot of times when you're a domain expert and you ask a basic question to ChatGPT and it gives a really bad answer, that's kind of an example of an area that you can niche down into and start thinking about, okay, if I was going to craft that answer, how would I do it? And then you can start stepping into maybe training your own GPT model and work into the code if you want to or not. I think building and fine tuning a AI model is just as valid as learning code.
Thank you. It's interesting 'cause I have a lot of conversations with ChatGPT. Most evenings we have a chat about something that I'm trying to learn. And it's interesting that expecting or knowing that it can make mistakes and that it does get things wrong, because when you have domain knowledge as well, and then how you can actually improve on it's quite interesting to think of being involved in that way. Emeka, it would be great to get your insight on experienced engineers being able to stay up to date with how much AI and machine learning is actually changing. So you mentioned doing some research previously. Is that what you do? Are there other things that you're doing to stay up to date within this space?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of it, to be honest. To be honest, it's part of it. And I think that another thing that's really important is also like maybe following influencer and signing up to newsletter. So I think there's a newsletter I sign up to the Sequence or so. They basically talk about new machine learning technologies, best practices, and all of these things. And I also signed up for Google Alert, mostly for machine learning and data science blog, in case like any of that pop up, I can be able to like, okay, read it and see what the new technology and the new best practices. But I think for me, two things that I always used to keep update is mostly LinkedIn and Twitter. So I follow like all of these people that publish research paper, like their own frameworks, and all of these things. So I usually use social media mostly to stay updated.
Yeah, keeps me up to date with most things as well, to be fair.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like I've learned a lot from just following people on Twitter. Like you can just open Twitter or LinkedIn and then you see someone publishing one new technique and like, oh wow, I mean, this is really interesting. Yeah.
So where are you finding things like, I know that social media is fantastic, but you mentioned the research papers that you were looking at. Where are you finding things like that? Is that because people are posting about them and you're knowing, or are there particular corporates that you're looking at and saying, actually, I want to see what they're going to be saying next? How are you staying up to date from that perspective?
Yeah, two things. One is community and the other is paper with code. So paper with code is like a directory for research. So they normally publish like the research paper, the code example, and the data set that they use. And then for community, there's an MLOps Slack community that I think anybody can join. It's basically like a community of machine learning experts, founders, and a lot of like amazing people. So you can just go to the community and maybe if you have like a question or something, you can just ask and they'll just through like articles and research papers that can help you like broaden your knowledge on that particular challenge that you have.
Amazing, thank you. What about you, Wamaka? What's your view on that? How are you staying up to date as well?
I will agree with Emeka. LinkedIn is great. I feel like every time I open the app, there's always something. It could be from an individual or community. There's so many communities on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I think, will be beneficial for people to join. I think most of them are free. I've never had to pay, so I'm not sure about that, but I think they're just easy to join. I would add networking. Within your network, you get to learn. So I had a call, for example, last week with a founder, and we were talking about GPUs, advancements in the GPU industry, and that's just something for me to learn based on just someone I had in my network. So don't be afraid to network. Send out invites because you never know who you learn from. It could be one-on-one, it could be via a post. Social media in general, definitely follow the right people, follow people within your industry. I will add, obviously, attending conferences like this, very great. I just learned from I'm not sure who said that, but learning about domain experience, actually speaking to ChatGPT and asking a question within I really like that. So I've learned that. So obviously, attend conferences, workshops, and I would say the last thing would be to take courses. I feel like within this space, it's just so important. It's not really, it's not always said, but it's very important to just take courses. It's not enough to just learn about this new technology or this new framework. You should actually go ahead to see, if you have the time, learn it, because you never know what could change within the sector. So take courses, keep challenging yourself, keep growing, and it's very safe.
Thank you. Anybody else got anything that they would add to how you're actually staying up to date yourself?
For me, sorry. For me, it's basically I use Medium a lot to read a lot of articles, especially working as a data analyst. A lot of people usually post like new dashboards or reports that they build, and they talk about some of the formulas and codes that they use. Something else I would say to add to what Nwamaka said about courses is also certifications, especially when you work with some tools, for example, Power BI. I don't know if Tableau has a certification, but I work mostly with Power BI. And whether you like it or not, companies would like to see that you have those kind of certifications to kind of prove that you know how to use the tool. So that's something else that I would also say.
Thank you. I know you've just posted something about podcasts as well, Joyanne.
Yeah, podcasts are my go-to, but that's, I think, the reason I like podcasts is because being theoretical data science, I don't need the details. Like I very rarely go look at the code or the setup, but podcasts are kind of the way I'm hearing the latest of what's happening with OpenAI. That one weekend where they fired him and rehired him, the podcasts were on it. The drama was going on. For those who don't know, OpenAI is one of the big platforms out there that kind of pushing the LLM, large language model movement at the moment.
Okay, thank you. What I'm actually going to ask from all of you is if you can, from all the things that you're learning, from all the research, from staying up to date, is there anything particularly innovative that you've seen in the space of late? Any new hip things that are happening? That makes me sound like the oldest lady in the world. But anything new that's actually happening in the space that people could actually be delving into deeper and finding out more about?
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think that this new framework called I think I pronounced it as DSPY, but it's DXPY. And it's just super interesting because it's changing the way people are using LLM, right? Mostly around, trying to bring back that structure we used to train like machine learning models using PyTorch into large language models. So you can be able to, define optimizer, you can be able to set up like a forward pass, and all of those kind of things. So like more or less like making it like PyTorch, but like for LLM, right? So like you're coding like PyTorch, but this time around you're basically building more of an LLM application. And it also supports like the chaining process. So you can be able to, do sequential calling. Maybe you want an LLM to do write, edit, publish, and all of those kind of things. So like I think it's something people should check out. I think it was made by Stanford NLP. So yeah.
Just before the next person gives theirs, you said LLM a lot. Can you just define that for anybody who doesn't know what an LLM is?
Oh yeah, LLM is like large language model. That is ChatGPT and the rest of that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think Yudia, you were also going to say your views on anything new that you've noticed.
Yeah, so a little bit different, but I just came across this startup the other day that are working on essentially transforming what is the graphical user interface. So we went from like a text-based interface to GUIs, which is where you've got the icons on your screen and you can click them with the mouse and move them around. And then now moving more into the realm of like using like almost an agent, like an AI agent that sits on your computer that has a face and a voice that can read you and understand you and you can talk to them. And that is now the next generation of interface for computers, apparently. So yeah, that looks super cool. I think they're called D-ID, so worth checking.
Ah, that sounds interesting. I spend a lot of time wondering what the thing is in the future that I'm not going to understand how to use at all. So you're all giving me the list of things that I'm not going to understand in the future. Wamaka, how about you?
I think for me, learning about the GPU advancements like you mentioned. So I don't know if this is really new, but I've never really heard about people being able to rent GPUs that are compatible with the PC or whatever machines they're working with. I thought that was really cool. Just trying to help cut costs, just make it easier, honestly, because GPUs can be quite a headache. I think also, obviously, the new framework, Activity, which I think is really cool, which is Python-based framework, just with the aim to, so we have several frameworks. So we have NumPy, we have PyTorch, we have all that. So this framework just seeks to unify them all, so you can convert one to the other. So obviously, because they have different syntax, the way they use, but being able to convert one to the other, it just makes it easy, makes you more productive. So I think these are the only two new technologies that I'm really aware of.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I do love to know what's the site for renting GPUs. Is it like a GPU marketplace or what?
Um, so it's I think it's still in the works, but it's like something they're just trying to try out. I don't know if it's something that exists already, but this particular one, I don't really have a site. I could find out for you and just send it over to you, so I could keep that in mind.
Definitely. I love that.
Great. Okay.
It's a great panel where the panelists can all learn from the other panelists. It means that everybody else is learning different things too. It's fantastic. Thank you. Joyanne, how about yourself?
Obviously, I'm going to say my startup, but like
Mm-hmm.
obviously we're doing cutting edge things, but we're not public yet. But one that is the buzz at the moment is the Humane Pin, which is kind of like hardware slash software. And essentially, they wanted to make a pin that you can put on your clothing and interact with the AI conversationally and not have to pull out your phone. It didn't do well. So the link I posted was to the review done by Marcus Brownlee, and he said it's the worst product he's ever reviewed. But it's kind of an example because I'm a little bit of a futurist. I can't wait until we have chips implanted in us and we can just, not have to take our phone out. I know it's extreme, but I was excited about that because it's kind of showing where AI will be when we'll be able to conversation communicate with it. Yeah, they got millions. Someone posted in the chat that they got millions to develop it and it was terrible. But I think it's a great example of where people are pushing AI to be.
I understand that. One thing I will say is my grandmother always said that if they ask us to have a pin put inside of us or a chip put inside it, we should say no to that. So but we'll see what the future holds.
I mean, I'm really interested in Joanna's startup. I mean, she mentioned something about bias in AI and the rest of that. I mean, I don't know if you've recently seen the recent scandal from Paul Graham and one other person talking about like different bias in AI, especially in terms of discrimination and also in terms of basically like flagging people that, oh, XYZ person used ChatGPT, but literally the person just did everything himself, you know. And then another one was I think it was uncensored AI, basically just cracking random joke and being so like, really biased, to some certain people, just basically like when you act it about, oh, you're from Mexico and you just already frame you as, you do some in quotes,
So one of the things, as I mentioned, my day to day, I spend a lot of time interacting with AI models. It's very easy to get them to be offensive. Like it's not hard. But going back to the analogy I mentioned around AIs being like puppies, a lot of these models were trained by white cis het men. So all the stereotypes and all the biases in the world are embedded into them. And it's interesting, the situation that you mentioned was, I believe, an author was accused of using the word dwelve.
yes, Jeff.
Yeah, that was it. And they said, oh, you must have used AI to write it. But the author said, no, English is just my second language. So I've learned more words. So it's becoming a situation with students as well, where when English is your second language, you learn proper English. And when you learn it as a first language, you don't. Debate me, people have arguments with that. So when lecturers are marking work now, they're assuming someone used AI to write the work and failing them when it's just that English is a second language. So it's increasing a lot of bias assumptions around many things. But someone also mentioned facial recognition and an AI sitting on your computer. That one, I feel that's going to fail with anyone who's darker than Beyonce, but personal opinion. I can go on about bias, Charlene, stop me.
Okay, there's actually a question on bias, and I was going to ask you first because I know that's a space that you're very heavy in as well. Wassala, how about you? So anything innovative or new technologies that you're seeing in the space?
Something innovative, not necessarily new, is RPAs, that's robotic process automation. And it basically is a mix of AI, screen scraping, and workflow automation. And it basically just helps organizations automate a lot of their repetitive tasks like data entry, simulation, analysis, and even like code deployments. And there's even like career paths. I know that UiPath is one of like the major let's say influencers in RPAs. That's something that is also very interesting, and like I feel like a lot of organizations will start using it very soon.
Thank you. I'm actually going to jump to a question about bias, because obviously it's going to impact all of us if we don't. So one of the things that I often end up talking about with all my knowledge in AI that I don't necessarily have, people always ask me about the impact of bias and why we need representation and all of that. You mentioned the people that are often involved in training these models or setting up these systems that we have. What are the issues that we could be facing? But then I guess how can we make sure that we don't face them? How can we fix them before they arise? Is it possible? Is it too late? Those sorts of questions as well. I'll start with you, Joyanne. Do you have an answer to all of my questions?
Those are multi-layered. I think there's two elements to it. There's bias in the data. A lot of data that's being trained, like if you've interacted with ChatGPT, you realize it writes in American English. So it'll put Z's in everything. So that's the type of bias. In the data is collected, it's mainly American facing. But also with that is the perception America has on any other country, culture, and anything like that is baked into that. So there's not a lot we can do in terms of tackling stuff that's already embedded. They are trying to counter it. Google Gemini came out with an update that got a lot of backlash because they overcorrected. I think they did the right thing. They overcorrected on skin tone representation in terms of generating imagery. So when people asked it to generate the image of a pope, it generated a black pope. And everyone was like, there's never been a black pope. And I'm like, well, AI is making things up, people, calm down. So there's the data element. The other side of it is how we interact with it. So a lot of the large language models and the models we're interacting, when we interact with it, we're retraining it by saying, yes, this is good, this is bad. And as people from marginalized background, it's also our responsibility, but we have to start prompting it for more representation of us and start telling it when it does bad things. A simple one, if you look at image generation or illustrations of Black people within the text to image models, they always make the front and back of the hands the same color. And whenever it does that, when I'm interacting with something, I'm like, no, bad dog. Um, so there's different ways of interacting with it, but there's some good stuff happening. One of my co-founder friends is trying to build a large language model solely based on Nigerian languages. And I think there's a lot of opportunities in other countries that we can look at building our own models based on data around ourselves. We can't wait for America, and I'm going to say America, but it's not just them, to implement it because they're doing it very backwards. But still use them, still use the tools, and still tell it when it does something that doesn't represent any kind of bias or any marginalization you see. Also question it. Again, stop me, Charlene. If for anyone applying to jobs, I think this one's a really good one. You should question in the interview process, or in if you have the opportunity to talk to a recruiter, if they're using AI in any of their filtering or any of their person selection tools, because there has been shown models that are preferencing to men, preferencing to more Western name, preferencing to certain universities. So if you ask them in the interview and they say they're using it, I would raise it in conversation and say, hey, I would like you to review my CV human to human, not human to human, you can say it another way. But a lot of the times these recruiters aren't aware that the tools they're using have bias implemented in them. Okay, I'm done.
And I guess the tools have bias because people have bias and they build tools, right? So with that in mind, what can we do? How do we navigate that as people that are building these new tools who are involved? And I guess it's difficult because the questions I tend to get is almost as though the only way to fix it is by Black people and other underrepresented groups being involved in creating these systems. Otherwise, there is no solution, if you know what I mean. But that can't be the only answer. So
And it's not the answer because on my course, my master's, I would say 90% of the students were either Nigerian or Indian. We didn't have ethics. There wasn't an ethics module. So if we as marginalized communities aren't being taught ways to implement this, we won't notice until we're using the tool. So it's not just putting people in the role, it's also making people aware. I think as someone entering the industry, the power we have is in questioning things and being there when things are being tested. I remember a case back in 2017 when hand dryers wouldn't work on a Black engineer's hand. And it's like, oh, well, if they were there in the testing phase. But I don't think it should be all on us either. I think question it, put it to your supervisors, put it to whoever's in the role, and be like, hey, you can go hire someone to help you work this out. And then get them to pay to work it out. It's not on the role of you, especially if you're entering the industry, it's not your role to fix the bias problem. It's huge.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any insight in bias? If you've come across anything in your current roles as well, where you're like, actually, this is something that either I did raise, or because I was able to have influence, I was able to change something that did happen, or that it would be great to get additional insights on that, maybe from when you've been actually working on actually building systems and so on. I think you look like you're about to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you can go, Vita.
Sure. Yeah, so thankfully in my role I don't deal with that kind of data, but yeah, I was fortunate enough to attend the FACT conference a couple of years ago, where it was kind of discussing all things research in terms of the bias, explainability space, transparency, and like who is held accountable when these systems go wrong. And like there were a lot of very, very alarming things about, for example, the bias in policing systems. So this is kind of like a problem that perpetuates kind of all systems of life that we can think about. Recruiting tools also being biased. I think there was an example where I don't know if any of you are familiar with HireVue. I don't know if it's specifically HireVue, but kind of similar platforms where you are required to submit like a video interview. So you record yourself answering particular questions, and video data has been shown to be very, very heavily biased, and like video machine learning systems have been shown to be very heavily biased. So even having something as simple as a bookcase behind you, or whether or not you're wearing glasses, can massively affect the outcome of your interview. So I think it's in terms of how we fix that as individuals, as Joyanne said, that's very, very difficult. But I think it's always great to be at least aware of how these systems can impact you on a day-to-day basis. And also don't be scared to advocate, don't be scared to call things into question if you see something that isn't quite right, because a lot of the time, no one is really held to account for what happens when these models go wrong.
It's interesting because you mentioned those sort of recruitment platforms. Because we recruit people onto a lot of our boot camps, we're actually being people are suggesting a lot more tools that we could use to recruit people and to take away the heavy load of reading applications. But I'm like, how do I know that it's not biased? And everybody that we work with, they're typically Black women that we're working with, right? And how do I make sure that you've not got bias in your system? And I guess one element is, maybe using those systems on a subset could actually help to get a better understanding as to what those systems are doing, and if there are biases in there that they're not picking up because they're not using them on the correct data sets and so on. But then on the other hand, there's going to be people that don't question it and that are just using them, and that could be heavily impacting the outcomes people have when applying for roles or opportunities. It's not even just jobs, it's opportunities across the board that people could be using these systems for. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to add on that? Otherwise we can move on.
I was going to say education as well is so basically there are some large language models specifically made for the education sector. So in the paper I authored this year, we actually did explore large language models in education specifically, and on top of bias, it's a big problem, especially with words. So just like Emeka said, when students use certain words or don't use certain words, then there's some bias there. You can't really say maybe we should have a more diverse production team, because it is broader than that. I don't know what solution is here, but yeah, just to add. So again, like Joanne said, if you're a student and you feel like maybe your institution uses AI to mark, and you think you've done well, right? You can challenge it. I think you should, just because it then brings the attention to it that there's some more bias here. I also think this is a trend that we'll see in the next few years. AI ethics. So it's like there'll probably be more talks around ensuring that models are less biased and they're developed more responsibly and more inclusive as well. I think this is a discussion that we will see more in the coming years within the space. So just wanted to chip that in.
Thank you. That's actually it's really useful hearing all of you talk about the ethics side of it as well. So one thing that we're doing is, because of the fact that we do need to be in the room as well, we're launching our one of our machine learning boot camps towards the end of the year. But the thing that we hadn't considered was the ethics side. We're looking at the technical side, but not that element. So it's really useful, and we will make sure that we add that element in as well, so that people can understand that when they are actually learning some of the other topics too. So what would be really useful, and we've covered the bias side, but what are the other technical challenges that engineers could face, or people working in this space face, when implementing some of these types of solutions in either existing systems or new systems that are being built? I know we're all going to have a different perspective on it as well. I don't know, Emeka, if you've come across any significant, technical challenges in implementing AI or machine learning solutions.
So I think I haven't really. Yeah, I think that one of the most interesting one is the GPU one, because I'm like, oh, I thought GPU is easy to get like CPU. Until I discover how stressful is it. like literally, I think I spent about 6, 7 hours going to almost all the regions AWS and GCP has just to look for like GPUs available, right? And I think that is an interesting challenge because there are literally a lot of quantized framework that people have put up out there, B2C, B2C plus plus, that they say, okay, you can use this to host your Llama CP, your Llama model or Mistral AI on the CPU. But the most interesting thing is how much there's really a trade-off between speed and latency. So they have to be a certain balance, and for that balance to happen, you need to be able to rigorously test what you're building, right? And then that's where the whole iteration process comes in, where you have to make sure that, okay, what's the performance of hosting a model on a GPU server, maybe from Hugging Face, and a quantized version, or maybe you quantize it yourself to be able to, on a certain threshold of precision, to be able to get like maybe the kind of performance you want, right? So I think that most importantly is the quantization part. But one thing that have actually helped me so far is mostly around research, right? Because it's very important, to be honest, right? And it just helped open your mind into a lot of possibilities, right? Which is why I always recommend people to do research before they start working on any project, because it's really, really helpful. Yeah. So about the GPU part, I mean, I feel like, anywhere they're sharing GPU, everybody's going to be there. The moment you put, oh, we are sharing GPU, the whole community is going to be there. Because it's really expensive, mostly. And if you really want to get a lot out of these models, you have to be able to have access to the GPUs, right? And it's not just expensive, it's mostly scarce. And sometimes I just wonder why they're scarce. And I discovered that it's just one company that's making GPU. Yeah.
And I was hoping as well, you mentioned the difference between, or you touched on it, I guess, the difference between CPU and GPU and what the difference in costing could be there. Could you elaborate on maybe the difference between CPU and GPU for people who aren't already aware?
Yeah, so I think that I would just make it really simple in the layman term, right? So imagine if you have a community of 2,000 people, right? And you want to cook for these people, right? So for CPU, you have like one chef serving one at a time, or you have like maybe a more accelerated CPU. You have like 2, 3 chefs or one chef and people helping the chef. But in a GPU sense, you have 2,000 people and you have 2,000 chefs, right? So GPU basically process mathematics equation, because they have the process mathematics equation in parallel, right? And CPU process it more like synchronously, right? So in a nutshell, I would say that because most machine learning operation are mathematical operation, you can do 1 + 1, 2 + 2, 3 + 3. CPU, you do one after the other, 1 + 1 is equals to do 2 + 2 is equals to this and the rest. When GPU sense, you can have multiple equations and multiple cores basically computing for this equation at the same time.
Ah, okay. That sounds like a huge, significant increase in cost then. Yeah,
Exactly. So it's
yeah,
pretty much faster to basically deploy or utilize the GPU for deploying any large language model.
yeah. So typically, because a CPU can typically do one operation at a time, right? And
Exactly.
yeah, okay, that makes sense. So they can do multiple in parallel with
Exactly.
CPU. That makes sense. Thank you. It'd be interesting to get your insight onto what some of the technical challenges could be as well, Joyanne, given that you've got, you're building something new, you're telling a tech team to go away and make something happen based on your fantastic ideas. What sort of challenges have you been seeing from your perspective too?
It might be more founder-based element. Is that everyone, there's no real agreement on what AI actually is. But that's kind of like within the industry itself. People think it's one thing or it's the other. I had a lecturer in my master's that said AI will never be a thing because we can't define intelligence. So some of the challenges are the general people using the software we're trying to build are expecting a lot more than what AI can generally do. And if you don't know much about it, they take things like what ChatGPT puts out or Bard as Bible, and they think it's the most amazing thing when really it's okay. It's great. A lot has happened, but it's not, we're not at Terminator level and we're nowhere near there. And we're not at like actual intelligence level. We're at regurgitation, in my opinion. So some of the challenges are that kind of when you do try and apply domain expertise to the readily available models, you realize how limited things are. And you need more data. So the other element is to get it to do what you want it to do, to get the models to interact and build something that's innovative. You need a large amount of data. And it's not a problem just I'm facing, but a lot of startups, even OpenAI or Adobe, I believe, is starting to pay people for hand and feet pictures because they need the data to improve it. I will find the article and say that I did not say, but they want pictures of your hands and feet, people, because it's notoriously bad at generating those two things. So yeah, data is one of the biggest challenges, and also the GPU having the space to compute it. But we're running out of well-written, diverse data to train these models on.
Okay, that makes sense. Just to double check, are they paying for the hands and feet pictures?
They are. I don't know how much. You might need to quite, get a lot, but some platforms which I shan't name might, convert their content,
Yeah.
I know there's some Instagram accounts that specialize, they might clean up. But anywho,
Thank you. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add? I saw you look like you're about to speak as well, Yudia, to give some of your insight on some of the challenges that you might face.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with what's already been said. I would say, in my experience, one of the things that people often don't think about is when you move from like maybe doing things at uni and your code all runs nicely on your computer and you don't have to worry about it. Once you actually have to put that model, that system into production, it may behave in a completely different way that you didn't expect because you've trained it on a particular data set that it's seen before. You kind of have a general idea of how it's going to behave. And then once it's actually live and it's getting new information that it's never seen before, doesn't know what to do with, then you start to see some really, really weird behavior. So I would say the main technical challenge is trying to anticipate all of the ways in which your system can go wrong, and try to essentially guardrail it so that you say, in this situation, if you're not confident, just don't say anything because maybe if you say something, the results could be potentially really, really bad. So I think there's that kind of predictability, that safety aspect around it as well.
That's such an interesting thing because obviously, so I've been a software engineer for quite a long time, and obviously you put stuff out and things go wrong because there's bugs and everything, but you know what to anticipate. You know the sorts of things that could go wrong, and if something does go wrong, you can generally figure out what may have broken within the system. It's interesting that you could then we're building systems that we don't know what could go wrong until it goes wrong. Potentially, you could put in guardrails and guess the things that could happen based on how it's used. But that's very different to building a system where you can kind of anticipate what could happen. You can write your test and make sure that it performs what you expect it to. It must be a different mindset to go from one way of working to another where you can't anticipate it. You almost have to make educated guesses, I guess.
Right. For sure. Like ultimately, a lot of these applications, they use a particular kind of form of machine learning called like deep learning, where these architectures are just huge. Like the amount of information it can store, it can train on is beyond like our comprehension or our ability to make sense of. So it's very difficult when a model says X, to go back and look at the inner workings of the model to try and understand where it came up with this. So that makes it ultimately kind of hard to predict what's going to come out sometimes, especially I would say this, we see this more in the case of like large language models where they're just so huge and they've been trained on so much data that it's almost impossible to know what's going to come out. And we just have to trust that what comes out is factual or true or inoffensive.
Absolutely. Thank you. Wamaka or Wasila, do you have any additions to add, any challenges that you've particularly faced yourselves or that you could anticipate happening?
Okay, yeah, I think just to make it simpler, I mean, we've spoken so much about more like more advanced machine learning technical challenges, but I think something simple, just for maybe people who are starting off, some challenges you can face are something simple like the data quantity to use when you're actually dealing with models, because then there could be the issue of overfitting or underfitting. You don't really know how much data you want to use sometimes, or how little data. I mean, not really little, but I think that's just something. Also, there will be issues around integration, especially when you have existing systems. So that's something to anticipate. I also wanted to add, Joanne said something, and it made me think back to what we're talking about on the bias in these models. And we did mention maybe we need a more diverse team to remove bias, but something that just came to mind was the fact that a lot of the people who are in some form considered diverse, so it could be the black African Americans, or people that are Nigerian who are more biased towards the British system. I would say there could still be that second-hand bias based on, for example, language. ChatGPT being American, if we did have a Black American on the team, could still use American English, right? So I think there's that also something. It's just came to mind. It's not really on the current topic, but I just wanted to check that in.
No, thank you.
Sorry, Charlie. I've explored that one as well, because even if we pinned it to Nigeria, I am not Nigerian. Please do not think me if I'm wrong. But even if we were to train a model to generate imagery based on Nigerian celebrities, the consensus is still that they will come out fairer, because the more famous people tend to be of light. So it's not, you can't just remove bias by making a thing diverse, making it diverse, because even within the systems.
Yeah, it's deeply rooted. It's a very big, complex topic. So.
A fun one, but complex.
I mean, all of it sounds like complex problems to me. All of it. Thank you. Wasila, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Because I don't really do a lot of data science work day to day, I don't really have so much that in that aspect. But something I remember from school and trying to work on my dissertation, building models and stuff, one of the major problems that I also faced was actually the hardware, and how when you're processing large amounts of data, your system could probably struggle. And that's even something that, even working as a data analyst now, when I have to work with millions and millions of data, sometimes my system actually just messes up.
Thank you. Can I ask a question about the data that you're analyzing? And this might be no, it's not a stupid question. There are no stupid questions. So I've, as I mentioned, I've my background is really building systems for people to use, and we'll use either relational or NoSQL databases or whatever. When you're referring to data, what format is this data in? Is it sitting in a range of databases? Is it unstructured? Where is it what is it when you're talking about data? What are you actually referring to?
So it could be different types of data. Currently, I work with structured data that resides in a database. Yeah, but because like I said, I work as a finance system analyst, so the data is coming from a system, and it's possible for you to work directly with that system, but you have to do a lot of normalization and structuring the data so that you can use it in the visualization tools. But it's already in the database, and all I have to do is to clean it, basically.
Okay, thank you. So typically, even if you're working with initially unstructured data, you'll need to take that data, clean it, put it into a database, make it somewhat structured so that you can then work with that.
Yeah.
Feel free to jump in, anyone, if there's any other experiences you've had of what it means to work with data in this space, because we've mentioned the word loads of times, and it would be good to be able to visualize it a bit differently.
It was mentioned earlier that there's different types. So you can have the very structured, and then you can have supervised and unsupervised. Unsupervised, you can chuck it in, they call it like a black box. I don't like the term black box, but they chuck it into a black box and then ask a large language model to figure out how it gets the end result. So that can be very, very unstructured, very, very loose, could be multiple types of data that's put into this model, or you can have like very set, this is what we're working on. What we use is somewhat structured because we're scraping certain websites, so we know there's a format to it, but we're not necessarily putting everything in a position. So it's a mixture of both. We know the format that we're using to train the model, in terms of if it's a job ad, it's going to have a title, it's going to have a salary, it's going to have this, but we're not organizing the data in that structure.
That makes sense. So I guess even when you refer to something like a black box, however we feel about the term, somebody must have built something to be able to read all of this data, or is it literally just we're throwing it into some kind of pot? What is it that we're referring to in that sense? Like when we're, if we're working in that kind of black box scenario?
It depends.
Okay.
Feel free for anyone else to chime in. In terms of the black box scenario for my work, it's that the model has already been built. So I'm feeding in the data through Python in the format that it wants, but everything that happens in between in terms of how it gets the result is the black box bit. It's like, how did this model work out? For example, everyone's done, when it asks, are you a human? And you have to click on the box to say, this is the traffic light. You're helping to train an AI model to work out where the traffic light is. How does it work that out? You don't really know. So that's the kind of black boxes, but in terms of the data going in, it's pictures. You're putting pictures in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I mean, it makes sense. I don't know that I can visualize it, but it makes sense. Thank you. Okay, so before we move on to the next question, which will be our last question before we have questions from people who are listening. So we do have people on YouTube who are listening, people in the Zoom chat as well, obviously. So if anybody does have any questions, do get them ready and start adding them to the chat, and we will be asking our panelists in a moment. But I guess a last question for me. We've spoken about some of the dangers and the fears and the concerns with some elements of AI, some of the challenges as well. But I guess from your own experience, do you have any examples where AI or machine learning has had a positive impact, a positive transformative impact on something that you may have been working on?
Yeah.
I just go first and say,
Mhm.
okay, well, ChatGPT is one thing that's helped everybody here. I'd like to think. So that's one thing that I can say has actually helped me a lot. Not really like taking everything that it says as the truth, but like using it to kind of influence some of the decisions I make, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. Yudia.
I'll speak more from like personal experience. As was mentioned, ChatGPT is very helpful. I think AI or machine learning systems are kind of embedded in so many different things that we use day to day that we don't even realize. I think one of my favorite ones is the ETA prediction on Google Maps. So I was lucky enough to meet the guy who designed the algorithm that does that, and it's super clever stuff. And you just use Google Maps and you kind of take it for granted, but that is some very, very clever machine learning that's going on under the hood to get you where you're going.
Wait, so that's not based on it knowing. I just thought it knew. I don't know what I thought
No,
it was.
no. So the ETA prediction is actually a graph neural network, which is like like a subset of like deep learning, and it's very, very cool stuff. A very good application of machine learning. What is conceptually quite hard, but the application is so useful, and like everyone uses it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. That's a that's great. It's always right as well. I love that. Thanks. Wamaka, how about you?
I would say ChatGPT as well. So I predominantly work with well, my own side of machine learning, I would say, is kind of basic. So not really using so much engineering um, techniques there, but I would say ChatGPT. I'm very big on ChatGPT. I don't think this is very, it's not really widely accepted and it's not really spoken about, but I'm big on like Jaren said, asking questions. Because you don't know it all really. I know these models are not so great, still early phases, but they could be of great help. So for example, I could be working, so the other 2 weeks ago, I was just doing something for my portfolio, really random. I had the columns I was working with. I was just trying to create a simple dashboard. I feel like I work more in Python than I do in Power BI. So sometimes I feel like it's easy to take that for granted. And with things like design, I think it's just something you need to keep doing so you get better at it. Sometimes I just like to do projects on my own. And I had the columns I was working with from Kaggle, from the data set from Kaggle, I knew I was trying to find, but something I like to do in those times is just ask ChatGPT, here's the kind of data I'm working with. This is what I'm trying to find. Here are the columns. Apart from XYZ, what do you think I could derive from that? Obviously, to do this, you need to have your own experience and knowledge, because again, ChatGPT could give you a really bad answer, but it could just open your mind to things that you probably didn't see, because you might have known it. You might know it in like 3 days, but ChatGPT could give you the answer like now, right? So I would say ChatGPT has been very fundamental for me, just learning, maybe troubleshooting sometimes. Very, very, I think that one, trying to troubleshoot issues. Sometimes Python throws you a very long error. Yeah, you're just like, where's this coming from? And sometimes you can just put it into ChatGPT and be like, okay, where's this coming from? And it just simplify it for you, makes it faster for you to find the problem. Sometimes it could just be like, you even include a space or like put in parentheses, but you can't really see it spot on. And it might have taken hours of ChatGPT gives it to you in like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, seconds. So yeah.
Thank you. That's actually really handy. So you kind of show your code in there and it will find the problem for you. Very useful. How about you, Joyanne?
So there's so many things. I mess around. Wow. I test a lot of tools. I've dropped a link for a platform where someone's collecting a bunch of different AI tools and integrations. I love to see how different people are using it. Um, ChatGPT, but I switch between Gemini, ChatGPT. I'm testing out this one, Minstrel, not a huge fan. Ironically, I don't like Claude, which is supposed to be the most ethical version. Yeah. Um, um, and then outside of that, I just enjoy AI in like the everyday stuff, like unlocking your phone. I'm dyslexic, so text prediction and spelling prediction, rewording, making my emails more polite. There's a lot of general day-to-day use that's really nice. In terms of marketing, the integration of AI into tools like Canva has been really, really good because you can conceptualize something as a startup founder. A lot of the times in I'm trying to conceptualize something that not a lot of people can see. So if I can describe it and AI can knock up a very weird looking version of it, it makes the conversation go a lot quicker. Um, but yeah, I I'm always in that. I'm always trying to break them. There's so many out there. A lot of people are in training on top of OpenAI. So we've mentioned ChatGPT a lot. ChatGPT is the interface for anyone who isn't used to AI at all. And then you have the OpenAI playground, which is where you can go in and you don't have to code. You can just try and test the different models and train your own models. So I definitely recommend if you're interested, you can create a free account and go onto OpenAI Playground and try and, build your own use case for a AI model.
Thank you. And over to you, Emeka.
Yeah, so I think that one of the most interesting, should I say trend or interesting technology that has really been transformative is mostly, it's basically embeddings, right? Because like we can basically see the impact of embeddings in every aspect, right? Starting from the research technology in terms of ChatGPT and the rest of them, like you can even see embedding in most of the like really generic stuff. So for instance, while I was working at Mono, so we had the challenge of we're trying to basically cluster transaction into basically similar transaction together, like into clusters, right? And at first, we basically tried the vectorization, like the usual 0 and 1 presentation for Word. And it wasn't really semantic enough because it wasn't able to cluster transactions to a certain level that we wanted it to. But the whole idea of embedding basically give that particular application a more power up in terms of understanding semantic meanings from different transactions and basically clustering those similar transactions together for maybe the purpose of the purpose of further transaction, and all of this kind of things. So like I feel like embedding is basically one of the most interesting uh, yeah, basically one of the most interesting technology out there. Yeah, just in general.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, that is all of my questions. And as I said, I knew I was going to learn a lot today. I think I've learned more than I was expecting, and I know you've all learned from each other as well. We've had people say that they've found this extremely insightful, and they've been taking quite a lot away from it too. So thank you very much. We do have a couple of questions that have come in from people who are listening. One of them is there a career for AI in data analysis? I don't know if somebody wants to pick that one up.
Because I work in data analysis, I'll just like start first. I think generally I like to think that the whole data career is there's a lot of similarities or like basic knowledge that can be transferable. And if I'm currently working as a data analyst, if I want to switch to say the more AI aspect of it, I just need to learn like the new skills, but that doesn't disregard the data analyst skills that I already have. So yes, there's definitely like career, like you can switch from data analysis. I don't know if that's what the person's trying to ask.
Okay. Anybody else? Another question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to differentiate. So if you're looking more AI, you probably want to do data science. Data analysis is more dealing with generating insights. You're trying to make sense of past data. Make sense of past data to kind of see where you're at. If you're looking to do more AI, which is many times future based or probably present based, honestly, you also do data science because then you're doing data analysis, but you're also doing machine learning or computer vision or whatever it is that you do. Those are more advanced AI. There's more advanced AI techniques. You're incorporating that as well. So yes, if you do data science, there will be AI involved. But if you do data analysis, chances are not really. You probably deal more with things like Power BI, SQL, Excel. It's different. It's like, there you're trying to more like support business decisions based on past data, making sense of past data. Whereas with data science, you're looking more at making predictions for the future. So, you're making sense of what you have now, but you're also doing it with the future in mind. It's like, we have this now. So when you're doing something like you're creating a model, a marketing model, for example, a good rule is to start with exploring. So you do things like EDA, in Python, so exploration data analysis. You're exploring the current data, if I see current trends. This also helps you note the things that you want to do or implement in your model when you're creating a machine learning model. So, you're incorporating that data analysis aspect by exploring the data, but you're also going forward like, okay, we have this and we can see this, but what can we do in the future? So I think that's something to know.
Thank you. That was really useful, and I feel like it kind of leads on to another question that we've had about whether or not AI could replace some of those data roles then. So you mentioned that data analysis is kind of making insights on data that you have, maybe taking insights to maybe make business decisions. But if I guess machine learning is also looking at some of that data to give you outputs or to answer some questions for you, does that mean that could essentially replace some of those data roles that already exist?
I would say not now. So just as Dorian said, we're in early stages. So for example, with ChatGPT-4, you can clean data apparently. This was just something I learned on YouTube, just watching a more experienced data scientist. She uses ChatGPT-4 specifically to clean data. However, I do have a friend who's doing an MSc, and he's obviously got his thesis, is trying to build a model. And I was like, well, I learned this on YouTube, give it a go. And he is like, yeah, no, it didn't really work out. So I think the more complex data sets, or just depending on what you're looking for, there's a limit to what ChatGPT, for example, can do. So, sorry, I hit my alarm. There's a limit. So, I wouldn't say it can replace at the moment, and then we also have the issue of bias. When you're dealing with data, for example, as a data analyst, you're trying to make sense of past data. You might think that's just something simple, but then we've talked about domain knowledge and we've talked about the fact that there's bias. I think the human factor is very important, and most of the things we use data analysis for are like businesses. So it's a very sensitive, you're playing with profit. You don't really want to give that to an AI model that has some bias in it to just help you make decisions. You want to bring on people who have domain experience, who just, even apart from just, with people you can collaborate. Whereas with an AI model, it's probably been trained depending on how it's set up. So even when sometimes you be correcting ChatGPT and it's just a chore, but when you're working with people in a team, you're able to discuss, learn from each other, and then you get the best output. So I would say no, not at the moment. Just because of the issue of bias, that taking out the human factor of collaboration and then all that. So
Yeah, I think I just want to add to what Monica mentioned. Yeah, so I think this is the essential reason why at the beginning, you basically mentioned domain knowledge is really important, because I think that is one of the most essential reasons why I feel AI is not going to take anybody's job. Because humans are innovative, right? Ecosystem change, things evolve, right? And humans have the ability to adapt to things that are changing. But AI can basically deal with the amount of data that you actually train it with, So even if it's basically involving or being able to adapt to a certain change, it can't on a human level, because human have more in-depth domain knowledge about certain things, right? So I think an instance is the data cleaning aspect, right? Let's say, for instance, you're trying to clean a data set and there's just certain level of in-depth cleaning that have to be done on it, basically to meet the ecosystem standard. The AI might not be able to do something like that, but it can be able to do more of a generic data cleaning process, right? So like you need to be able to now either ask it personally to do a more in-depth based on your domain knowledge, something like that. So I think that it can't really work on its own without the human supervision, but with the human supervision, you can do a lot of amazing things. So that's why I think that just helping people ease their workflow and basically speed up the process at which they use to achieve a task.
Thank you. Awesome. Any additions to that before I move on to the next question?
I'm okay. I'm going to be slightly controversial here and disagree. I think it very much depends on the job. I think for some people, if your entire job is to pull in data, plot some graphs, put together a PowerPoint and send it to people, I think that can more or less be automated, or a large part of that can be automated. And ultimately, you'll reach a stage where perhaps you needed 5 people to do the job, but now that you've been able to automate a large part of it, now you only need 3. Now, I think on the flip side is going to create new jobs and new opportunities for people to upskill or to refocus their energy on tasks that require more human input, more judgment, more reasoning. I think that's where AI systems at the moment fall short. They're not really able to reason about things that they see. I think that's where the human aspect comes in. So, for example, on the data science side, yes, you can have a model generate some code to create another model, which then will output something, but it doesn't have the knowledge, or as you mentioned, the domain expertise to even think about what data needs to go in there, or how to design that, or how to even make sense of the results. So I think those areas, those more complicated tasks, are where humans are really going to shine. But ultimately, the more manual or repetitive tasks, we probably will not see as many jobs there as we used to.
Thank you. With that in mind, just talking about new jobs, a job that we see on the market a lot of the time now is like prompt engineering. Can anybody elaborate on what that practically means for somebody who was gonna go out there and become like a prompt engineer? Does that mean writing sentences into ChatGPT, or does it actually mean something else? And I assume it means something else. So can anybody elaborate on that, the sort of new roles that we can see coming out as well?
Yeah, sure. I can explain a little bit prompt engineering. So essentially, with these models, if we use large language models, for example, what you're putting into the model is text most of the time, and you're trying to get some response from it that fits whatever you're trying to get. So you want to make sure that the answer you get is useful, that it's helpful, maybe that it's not offensive. So the only real way to control what comes out of the model is to change what you put in. So prompt engineering is about trying to understand how best to ask the model to get the outcome that you want from it. And there are lots of different techniques, different ways of doing that to kind of shift or nudge the model in the direction that you want it to. Maybe anyone else can chime in.
No, I definitely agree on that's what prompt engineering. In relation to the question before and the conversation before, I think we're at a moment where both things can happen. I don't think AI is going to take anyone's jobs in the way that the media is presenting it. It's not going to come out and fully take over. But what was mentioned before is that I think it will take the jobs of those who do not want to upskill. And my prediction is that every job, even manual jobs, will have an element of prompt engineering, because you still need, like, you can give me a recipe and I can cook it, but it's still not going to be as good as a chef who's been cooking for 50 years. Like, we can start in the same place, but different. And I think a lot of the manual roles, there's a lot of opportunity there for, especially those in data, to take their domain expertise, learn prompt engineering, and upskill so they're not pushed out the market. Unfortunately, my other prediction is that the ones that are going to get pushed out of the market are going to be those from marginalized backgrounds, most likely. But that's an opportunity, like where things like coding like Black females exist, to upskill people, to develop these skills and just keep up to date what's going on, so that if you are doing a manual-ish role right now and it switches, you can step up and be like, oh, I can be the one to oversee the AI doing the job of 5 other people that's now requires one person to oversee the AI doing it.
And that takes us perfectly on to our next question, which was what would be the most valuable skill for somebody who was starting out? But I'll also kind of ask, what would be another valuable skill for somebody who's already experienced within tech, to have influence and to be within to work within the space as well. I am going
I
to
can take
ask
that.
Marco, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think there's so much to learn, honestly. Like it's just like there's so much. Like wow. So I would start with the more experienced person in tech. Something I think is really big and is not really spoken about. Well, I took a data science course 2 years ago, like a standard one, and something that we lacked was cloud. I don't think cloud is really spoken about, right? And I think it's something that is big. You know, you can see cloud with SQL and something as I won't say basic, but you can see cloud with something as basic in data as SQL and also things as advanced as machine learning. So I feel like cloud for a more experienced person who probably doesn't have any cloud experience is very beneficial to get into just learning that. And for the beginners, I would say start basic. It depends on what you want to do, honestly. If you just want to be a data analyst, the basics, SQL, pick a visualization tool. I'm very Power BI biased. So yeah, join us. And then Excel. Excel's great. I feel like Excel is underrated. Excel can do so much. It could visualize, not as great as Power BI, but you can do some visualization there. You can program with VBA. So I feel like Excel is really good. I still use Excel mainly for data cleaning, just because, but you know, learn those three. And then you can build on them as you go, depending on what it is. Because the higher you go, the more you learn what you want to do. So when I started, or I started with Python, they'll be like me. But you know, then I went back and did the basics. I then went to learn visualization tools and do more with Excel and SQL. And then you know, I did machine learning and computer vision. Never used computer vision till tomorrow. But you know, I would not have thought in that moment that I would be doing machine learning now. But I found myself doing that. You know, so as you go on, as you interact, you will find more things you want to add on, more things you want to learn. I started off with Tableau. It was fine, you know, but then I went to look for Power BI. So you know, so just start with the basics, depending on what you want to do. If you want to do data science, you know, and you build on those data analysis tools. So you have SQL, Power BI, Excel. Then you can add Python to it. If you don't want to program, something someone said on LinkedIn the other day was data doesn't really have to be code. I feel like people just think you need to learn to code, you need to learn Python, you need to learn R, you know, to be in this space. But honestly, you could make an impact just with Power BI or Excel or SQL. You could keep it simple and, you know, you would find a job, you would do great. You know, it depends on what you want to do. So let's say you're coming from, for example, originally I come from a finance background. I love finance, so finance is the core of everything I do. The idea originally was that I wanted to do more. So in finance, I specialize in investment banking, asset management. So we're looking at assets, we're looking at instruments, we're looking at analysis of investments. And so, you know, I already had that analytical background. And what I wanted to do there was to then leverage tech to see how I could improve on that, which is why I did Python first. That's a long story, you know. So that was the original idea. And so for me, the basics were ideally Python should not have been in it, but the basics were supposed to be Power BI to then see trends. You know, SQL is, I think SQL is basic, honestly, and Excel to forecast. You know, I'm dealing with financial data. But then as I went along, I saw that I could do more with other tools and I added those. Currently, I am learning, trying to get into Azure. I feel like everyone does AWS, so I want to do Azure. So, you know, I'm seeing that, okay, this is beneficial based on conversations I've had or articles I've read, you know, so start basic and then build along as you go. That's it.
You. Does anybody else have any additional insights as well?
So, staying in my lane of bias, I think if you're getting started, the easiest thing you can do is watch a documentary on Netflix called Decoded Bias. And it kind of gives you an insight into some of the biases, and it's nice, light. Um, I think that's a good one to become aware when you're stepping in the field, and it kind of gives you a high level overview. Um, The other thing I think of getting started is we've covered so much from data to machine learning to neural networks. There's a lot going on, and it can feel overwhelming because the space is changing so fast. So I think find when you find something you like, just learn a little bit. Learn a little bit, find a little someone. A lot of people mention LinkedIn. Find someone on LinkedIn who talks about that quite often, and don't try and learn everything. You cannot learn everything about AI and machine learning. It's been going on since the 70s. I know it seems like it started in November last year, but this has been happening a long time. So yeah, my recommendation for those getting started is checking out the Coded Bias. For those who are more into the field already, you can skip ahead, and the person who stars in that film, Dr. Joy Bolawini, has a company called the Algorithmic Justice League, and they have a lot of papers in depth around how bias impacts machine learning and so forth.
Thank you. We actually did a watch party in, I think, during COVID, because at that time we were all trying to figure out how to interact with each other over the internet. But we all watched Coded Bias, and it was really, really insightful. I guess on very much on that bias perspective, right? Like understanding how all of these changes can actually have an impact on us with all the biases built into it. So I'd recommend it too, but take it from one of the experts, not from me. Thank you. So got another question. Is machine learning big for getting jobs these days? So is that something that you feel that people need to get into if they want to actually get a job at the moment, especially within the tech space? Or are there still jobs in other areas within tech? Do you think machine learning is like a really key thing that people need to learn at the moment to get those jobs?
Sarah, just go first. So I know it's machine learning that's stated here, but sometimes I don't think so. I think you can get jobs in like any aspect of data. And sometimes when you read like some job, it's very important to read the job descriptions before you apply for jobs, right? Because I feel like some recruiters use just the big words, and then the job descriptions could be something different. For example, you could say data analyst, but when you read the job description, it could be a data science role, or a data science role, but it's a data analyst. A data science job title, but it's a data analyst role. So I think it just depends on your skills and how well you sell yourself. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a follow-up question actually. So we have somebody who's on the call who's running, I guess, a tech community as well. So bringing people together with that view of tech. So running a mixture of events and other opportunities to support people. Is there anywhere that you can see machine learning supporting that kind of business? One, because I also wouldn't mind stealing some of the ideas that you might have. So is there any way that you think machine learning could benefit this kind of business, a business that's supporting other people within the tech community and bringing people together?
All depends on the data you have. I think one of the richest things communities like Coding Black Females and any kind of community that's supporting marginalized groups to get into tech, you have data the big companies don't. So, for example, Coding Black Females has a YouTube channel. You can train a model on what videos to recommend to people based on where they are and on their skill set. So if they're starting out in data science or machine learning or AI, you can say, okay, watch this YouTube video from Coding Black Females and so forth. Or not that you would do this, but you could train a model to say which companies have the better, like what are the good signs of a company that is a good place for a Black woman to work in. Don't recommend that, that's highly unethical, but it would be a good model. But yeah, the data that these communities have, I think, is a great way to start and explore what the community wants and what questions you get asked often. The simplest way I think to deploy that would be if you have access to the paid version of ChatGPT, you can build a custom GPT with your smaller data set, but be mindful that you are feeding into the bigger machine when you upload that data set.
Very useful to know. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other insights on that?
Yeah, I
I
think.
wanted to.
I mean, you can go, Maka.
Okay, great. I just wanted to add to what Joanne said. you could also probably build a model that kind of tests your progress. So where are you at? Are you where you not really where you want to be, but in terms of you've been learning, just gauging that against whatever it is, but just a model as well that could probably track learning and progress in whatever it is that you're learning. I had another one, but I don't remember right now, but I guess Emeka can talk and then I probably will come back to it.
Yeah, I think now I just wanted to add to what Joyanne said. You can also explore the OpenAI assistants. I mean, it's pretty much an impressive one because it's allow you to like set up custom functions, more like agents, and do function calling. So maybe if you want to add maybe your own internal data set, but you want to call only the important data set, you can, just use the assistants and be able to call maybe the important data set you need based on your query kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, I think that is all that.
Lovely. Well, I'm going to say a huge thank you to all of you for all of your fantastic insights. As I said earlier, I've definitely learned a lot. And I know that everybody who's sat in the chat listening, being involved in the session today has also taken a lot from all of you. I've got some new ideas. I've got some areas that I'm going to be implementing that we can actually use in CBF. But then also it sounds like people are really going to take some of those benefits to their own work, or at least know where to start or know how to progress as well if they're already extremely skilled. So I just want to say a huge thank you for being involved today and for sharing your fantastic insights with the community. I'm going to be a little bit annoying now and just ask you all to smile beamingly so I can take a photo, which I'm going to use for social media. But if you can all just give me a quick smile, then I will take a picture and then we can all go and do some networking. I'll take a picture now. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Thank you so much. I will stop the recorder and I'll also stop the